So what's your full name?
Before I was married, I was Linda Day, but now I'm Linda Bidston.
Perhaps we could just start by you telling me what you remember about your early days, and I'd also like to hear what you can remember about your father and your mother and what they did, and if you can tell me about your grandparents.
Well, my granddad was a docker, and
Was he a Liverpool man?
no, he was Welsh, of Welsh birth, and Grandad, when he was 11, went to work on the docks. His name was Hendry, Hendre, Williams, but everybody called him Henry, but his name was actually Hendry.
And is that a Welsh?
Yes, it's Welsh. Funnily enough, my dad's father was Welsh as well. He ran away to sea when he was 14 on a sailing ship as a cabin boy, which was hard. And so Grandad worked on the docks all his life. My mother's brother was killed on the docks when she was 17. One of the nets came down and it broke. Don't know whether it was rope or a chain, but it broke and it hit him on the side of the head, and he was in his early 30s, 32. And then 6 weeks later, his other brother he died, Jim. So I think that must have been awful for my grandmother. We'd moved down south because my dad had an accident. He had a motorbike and he'd smashed his leg and he couldn't bend his knee. He had a silver plate in his knee, so he wasn't fit to go in the army. He was working up here and he trained as a woodcutting machinist. You had to get permission then to change jobs. Now, my Auntie Annie, my mother's auntie, had moved down to Farnborough, and she said to my mother, there are plenty of jobs down here for John to get a job. John is my dad. By that time, because of his leg, he was what they called a jobber. He went round houses for landlords and fixed things, and he thought he would earn more money down south, so he applied to go down, and he got permission, and he went down to work in the aircraft factory in Farnborough. And we were only there a few weeks.
So the whole family moved?
No, just me, my mother, my dad. My mother's two sisters, one was 14 and one was 15. And they worked in a hotel. And we couldn't get anywhere to live. And then this family, my mother was in the little shop, and this woman said to her, she said, you're looking for somewhere to live. So my mother said yes. So she said, well, I've got a cottage you can move into. So we moved to 5 cottages, Owlsmore, and they were gypsies. And they were very, very good to us. They gave my mother furniture, because my mother always said there was an enamel bucket just by the front door full of money, pennies and halfpennies and shillings and what have you. And they said to my mother, if you need money, help yourself. Well, of course, my mother wouldn't do that. And then, of course, my mother wanted to come back to Bootle because I was ill. She was told she had to push me in a pram because it might have damaged my heart. And when we got back, everybody had been evacuated to Southport. So we had to go as well. No gas, no electricity and no water in Bootle because all the mains had gone.
So the war had started while you were down south, had it?
No, it had started before we went.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were only down there, I think we were down there about a year before we came back. And we went to Southport and we had to sleep in Ash Street Church for a week on the pews because, again, nobody wanted us.
So when you were evacuated, was it just you as the children that were evacuated?
No,
was it the whole family?
The army sent lorries and everybody had to get out of Bootle. Nobody was allowed to stay. I can't remember what they called them, the people who found you somewhere to live. They gave my mother and grandma this address and they said, go and see if Mrs. Gertzog will put you up. Now, Mrs. Gertzog was a Polish Jew and she had a second-hand shop. So we went. We didn't think there was much chance because there were so many of us. She was out when we got there and there was just Isaac. That was her nephew in the shop. And so Grandma said to him, we've come to see your mother. He said, oh no, my mother's in Manchester, but I'm living with Auntie. But he said, she's gone to the sale room. So he said, are you the refugees? So my mother said, yes. So he said, oh, well, it's all right, you can stay. So she said, you can't tell us that, you're only a boy. He said, no, I've had my bar mitzvah, I've had my 13th birthday, and I am now the man of the house. So we're there, I think we were there about 2 years.
So how did the war affect you in Southport? I mean, and were you aware of what things were like in Bootle?
Oh God, yes. Southport, you wouldn't have known there was a war, but here, you know, I expect it was the same in Glasgow, because if you go down Marsh Lane, where you got off the train, if you'd have turned left, I never know me left from me right, you're actually practically on the docks, and all of that end of Bootle was just flattened. It was in a bad state. And I just thought that's how it was, you know, I mean, I didn't know any different. And my Uncle Tom, who lived up that way, they had a council, one of the first council houses they lived in, and they had an air raid shelter, and we'd walk up there every so often and stay the night. But that was funny, because when the tide came in, the shelter would be about a foot in water and then it'd go out again, which was quite funny. He'd built bunk beds and things, but we couldn't use the bottom ones, so all the kids were thrown in the top bunks. And
what about school?
I went to school. I started school when I was 5 in Berska, because by then we'd moved to Berska again to avoid the war, you know. And I quite liked that, because I was allowed to play in sand and water and things. But I was only in the infants class for about, must have been till the end of September, and because I was quite a clever kid, they moved me up quickly, which I didn't like. I like playing in the sand. And but we were only there, I think we lived in Berska, because I was 6 when we moved back, because my brother was born then. There's just the 2 of us, and I'm 6 years older than him. And
6 when you moved back to Bootle?
Yeah.
Okay. And so the war still on at that stage?
No, it was just, I can remember the big bonfire outside the pub for VE night. They had a street party, and somebody had made ice cream, and I didn't like ice cream, I found out. I didn't know. And then my mother came, absolutely delighted, a banana, and I thought, well, I didn't think much of that either. You know, all this excitement over these things, and I wasn't very struck with them. And we moved up to Yorkshire when I was 8.
Yeah. And that was because, what, for
1947.
Was that your dad's a job, was it?
Yes, for work for my dad, to a little tiny village. And it was the year of the big snow, so we were snowed in till the following May. We moved in the beginning of February, and the snow was as high as the walls, and sometimes higher. And the RAF dropped bread for us, and it was funny, because you'd open the front door and all the snow would fall on you, which I quite enjoyed, because I didn't have to go to school for 6 weeks.
Yes. But you then went to school in Yorkshire for a period of time?
Yeah.
How long were you living in Yorkshire?
Till I was 17.
Oh, okay, good while then. Okay. So then you came back to Bootle. So what happened then?
Well, they wanted to give me on the dole, they wanted to give me a green card, which meant I would be a lift girl or something like that. So I thought, sod that for a lark. So I found my own job.
What, in a department store?
Yeah, Lewis's. But I didn't want to do that, so I found a job, and I was working. It was good, actually. I was working in the office in Charlie Wilson's, which used to be in Renshaw Street, and they sold a lot of books, technical books. And because I'm not now, I used to be very good with books. I could borrow whatever I wanted, because it didn't look as though it had been read. So I was, in heaven, because I could read whatever book I liked. But I'm not good at maths, and I used to have to balance the books, and I'd have a blinding headache every time I came home. So then I saw an advert for a window dresser's job, so I applied for that, and I got it. Mainly because the area manager was called Mr. Shaw, and he came from Burnley. And the school I went to had a very good reputation in Yorkshire, but of course nobody had heard of it down here. So he gave me the job on, you know, the understanding that because I'd been to this school, I'd be able to do it.
That's a good reference. So where was that? Where were you working there?
I travelled all around the northwest, dressing windows for Timothy White's, which was a chemist.
Yes, I remember that.
Which I loved. I'd have done it for nothing, but you know, I didn't get paid. And I enjoyed that very, very much.
So did you know your husband at that stage?
No, I met him while I was working. I used to go to a club called Streets, where all the art students went, and I was a beatnik. That's me up there with
on the photograph.
class. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And I met him, and a week after I met him, he asked me to marry him, and I chased him. I said no. I was 22, nearly 23. And then 3 weeks later, he asked me to go and live with him, so I chased him with a flea in his ear. And then we got married 6 months later. We'd only known each other 6 months, and we've been married 55 years.
Congratulations.
So it was a good idea.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. And but you know, people said, "Oh, he's got such a good job," and I thought, if they only knew. It sounds good, but you don't get much money for it. Yeah.
So what did he do in the museum?
He designed. They were just Liverpool Museum was badly bombed during the and they were just building the new galleries. So he was designing the galleries as they were, you know, as they were repaired. And he did that really for 11 years, and then he got a job taking travelling exhibitions round all schools and small art galleries in the northwest, which he enjoyed very much. And then he was asked would he go and teach in Hugh Baird. They wanted somebody to teach, because museum, there was only Liverpool museums who had a designer at that time, but you know, within the 70s everybody started getting designers, and they wanted to start a course at Bootle. And he went there, but he was only there for about 18 months, 2 years, and then he went to Mabel Fletcher. And then a lad he'd been at college with, John Mansfield, become an architect, and he was designing this museum out in Ras Al Khaimah, which is 40 miles from Dubai. It's a little individual state, because there's 7 True Shalom, well, there used to be the True Shalom state, and the UAE now. And so we went to live in Arabia for 3 years, which was great. Children came with us and were thrilled because they didn't have to go to school. They took after the mother.